William, are we good? Do we have fuzz or anything?
Good morning, everybody. It's Tony again with Rebel Financial. Happy Friday to you all. I am here today with somebody who's kind of in our industry a little bit, with Elaine Luttrull,
Yes.
if I've said that right? So I'm going to qualify this too, that I don't want to say Eileen, because Eileen is our marketing person, and I better not say that. So if I do, you'll know why. But anyway, so you are in our business, and you, to the degree that you help people, mainly in the creative arts industry. Okay, but I'll let you explain it. You'll do a better job than I will.
Yeah. What I like to say is I empower creative individuals to manage the business and financial side of their creativity.
Okay. And creative people, if you know, if I'm allowed to stereotype that, I would think are more anxious to do things that are more artsy as opposed to more number orientated. I know that stereotyping says it doesn't count for everybody, but most people, most Americans, want nothing to do with budgeting or watching their money, doing things like that. And I just think it might be one level higher with people who are more artistic and less number. So
I think there's some truth to that, and as you point out, you know, lots of us are really, really bad at dealing with money, and many creative individuals are no exception. But what I've also found is that once they kind of master some basic ideas, theories, principles, habits, vocabulary, it's actually our creative friends that are better at managing business and entrepreneurial topics than maybe someone who's a little bit more analytically trained, because they're able to very nimbly respond to things, or change, you know, what unfolds, or adjust a plan quickly in real time. There's no expectation when you're starting a painting or a composition of a piece of music that you know exactly how it's going to end. And budgeting is kind of the same way. You make your best guesses about what might unfold, but you have to still work with it in real time and then see where it ends up. And I think that's very similar to the creative process in a lot of ways.
okay. Well, you have a great, interesting background. So talk a little bit about how you got to where, not just Ohio, because you've been here for 8 years, but how did this business start, your background that led to that?
Yeah, well, I am a CPA by training. I studied accounting and economics, and I went to work for one of the big 4 firms in New York right after graduate school, and loved it. Had an incredible experience shoving a whole lot of professional experience into a relatively short period of time. I did mergers and acquisitions and tax consultancy work.
Were there only 4 at that time?
There were only 4 at that time, yes. The 5th was a recently closed departure. And when I was in college, I had actually interviewed with the 5th, so it was closing down kind of in real time. But no, I went to work for a big 4 firm, and it was an amazing experience. But then after about 4 years, I stopped seeing myself as a partner there and started exploring other ways to use some of the same skills in a way that felt maybe fulfilling in a different way. So I started volunteering with a group called the Arts and Business Council of New York, and found that I loved using my technical and analytical skills in the creative industry. And then I started applying for jobs, and absolutely loved the process of ending up at Juilliard, where I was the director of financial analysis for about 4 years.
Yeah.
Talk about a dream job, right? Using the same analytical, financial, technical skills in service of the next generation of amazing artists, dancers, and musicians.
Right. Well, you nicely say that when you were at that big firm, you consolidated 6 years into one because of the hours and the pressure and all those things, and a great education, right?
Absolutely.
You know, the best thing that you could do to get education in that world, but then a total change to go to a nonprofit like a school like that.
It was a total change in a lot of ways. Definitely the expectations were different. Certainly in an accounting firm, there's a very linear career path, right? You start as a staff, and then a senior, and then a manager, and eventually you become a partner. And in the nonprofit world in particular, and also as freelancers and creative individuals, there's not that linear career path at all. So it takes a little bit more introspection and reflection to figure out what you find fulfilling and how you want your career to unfold, and how you want to serve the world in a powerful way.
Yeah. And like you say, the linear part, as you used, I mean, a week to week is not going to be routine for that world of art and things like that, right? So they have a number of different, you know, most Americans struggle as it is, as we talked about, with budgeting and saving money and getting ahead and not realizing the importance and significance. But many artists it's just, they don't even have the consistency of income often, and they don't know, you know, I think that, like you had said earlier, they are good problem solvers, right?
Yes.
I mean, because that side of the brain is doing well, so they're going to be good at that. But
Yes.
they really want to be artists and not business people or budgeters.
Yeah, and sometimes I think it's easy to forget that that problem-solving skill, right, comes with a risk as well, right? Sometimes we're so eager to just figure things out, we forget, as creative individuals, how much power we still have, right? The idea that, yeah, you can solve a problem, and you can still get paid and fairly compensated for your goods or services, whatever you're producing. So I think it's important to understand both the strength in that ability to think creatively and nimbly and problem solve, and also think about the monetary value inherent in that.
Right. So you stuck with school somewhat. You still work.
I did.
So talk a little bit about that.
So libraries and education, I mean, I'm a big believer in both. I think they're both sort of magical places. And when we ended up in Columbus, I started reaching out to anyone who was remotely connected with the arts in Columbus. And I sent out a whole bunch of emails. And I was expecting kind of a New York response rate, right? You send out 100 emails and 2 people respond and one of them is not nice. But I found Columbus is a different animal. So I got very kind, welcoming responses to almost every single email I sent out, because Columbus is just an incredible place that welcomes new individuals and looks for the strengths and value in each individual. And so I started teaching some workshops. I gave a tax workshop for the Ohio Arts League at CCAD, the Columbus College of Art and Design, one early Sunday morning, and happened to meet the provost of CCAD, who was there at the time. He was also on the board of the Ohio Arts League, and he introduced himself afterwards, and he said, that was amazing. And it was interactive, we had fun, there were lots of questions. It was not what you imagine a tax workshop on a Sunday morning would be like. And he said, could you do that, but for a whole semester? And I was a little naive, having never taught a college course before, and I said, sure, of course, how different can it be? And that's how I sort of dove into theory, pedagogy, sort of the nuts and bolts behind creating an educational experience that wasn't just a workshop, but was an entire 16-week experience that would really focus on helping students, and at CCAD they are all creative artists and designers, helping them get to a place where they need to be successful, while knowing that taxes is not the most important thing they're going to learn at CCAD. They're going to learn incredible technical skills and pedagogy surrounding the critique process and how to take feedback and adjust things and conceptualize something. All of those skills that are so needed in the future of every industry, really. And then the business savvy, the vocabulary, all of the nuts and bolts of building some sort of enterprise around those skills is what I get to help them with.
Okay. So you, the class did not exist before you started teaching it?
That is correct,
Okay.
yes. The Business and Entrepreneurship Department started with a handful of us. I call us wandering adjuncts, and we were brought in to sort of figure out what this looked like. And so we experimented, we led classes for about 2 years, and then I was invited to come on to CCAD full-time to sort of formalize the curriculum in this Business and Entrepreneurship Department.
Okay.
And I was able to start the department and lead it for 4 years, and then pass it on to the next leader, who's doing a wonderful job incorporating management skills and some sort of design thinking ideas into really kind of hammering home the skills that artists and designers bring to broad industries.
Okay. I'm curious because you designed a 16-week class from scratch, right?
A lot of them.
A 2-hour. Yeah. So what is that process like? I mean, was that on the go, or did you?
Oh no.
Yeah.
No, I think it does a disservice to the students to do it on the go.
Yeah.
I think, when you're thinking about planning out an educational experience, first of all, you identify where you want your students to go. And it's the same in working with clients. Where do we want to be? And with clients or with adult learners, it's sort of a co-development process, right? You come to a mutual understanding of where you want to be. But sometimes with students, they don't know. So they need some expertise to help know where they need to be. Then you identify the starting point, right? And then you identify the gaps. Is it a knowledge gap? Is it a habit gap?
Yeah.
Is there a motivation gap because a third grade teacher told them once that they don't do math, or artists aren't good at math, or something like that, right? So oftentimes the gaps go beyond just, I don't understand what a debit or a credit is, or a vocabulary gap, into something a little bit deeper. And then you design readings, activities, discussion questions, educational experiences that nudge the learner or the client or the adult forward toward where you want them to be.
Okay. Well, and I just, I see these classes and the output of it and think a lot of, and you mentioned it or hinted about it, is psychology.
Indeed.
And so teaching often is, and I think that's why a lot of people struggle with teaching, because they don't often understand that they are able to communicate in one way, and it is not good enough to address the different needs of the different students and not be able to alter what they're doing to do that. So did it, any class in particular that you probably taught from the beginning and exists now? Did it evolve a lot? I mean,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I've taught a handful of different classes, and two classes in particular, the two that I still teach, and they are probably my favorites, still exist, and I've been teaching them both for 6 years or so. And what's so interesting is that the first 2 or 3 semesters, the course evolves pretty dramatically. You have an idea, you try it out, maybe it doesn't go according to plan, and then you adjust things. Or maybe you ask for feedback from the students, and you realize that what you thought you were achieving wasn't even remotely close to what they were getting. So there's a lot of listening and rebuilding that goes on, sometimes in real time, but more often than not over the first 2 or 3 semesters. But then you get sort of to the rhythm of it. You are better able to anticipate the questions and where the barriers might be, while knowing that every class and every human brings their own unique perspective to it. So there are always surprises, but usually the rhythm settles down after the first few semesters.
Well, that sounds like a lot of fun. So
it is. It's amazing.
So something else you've done? You've written a book. I know you're in the process of writing a second one. So let's talk about the first one, Arts and Numbers.
Arts and Numbers.
All right. So you wrote that, 6 or 7 years ago now?
Yeah, it came out in 2013.
Okay. And where can people find it in town? On Amazon, right? They can go to Amazon.
You can find anything on Amazon, but you can also go to your library, which is the more budget-friendly version of getting access to the information. And periodically, generally towards the start of each academic semester, we invite the publisher invites people to download it for free. So you can also pay attention to those. And then excerpts of it have been published in a handful of different things.
Okay.
So the information.
So who would want that book? Who would that be useful for?
So it's generally useful for someone who's probably within the first decade or so of their creative career, trying to figure out what they're doing and what their creative career is going to look like. Does it look like a traditional career path where you might go to work for a fashion design company like Abercrombie & Fitch? Or does it look like you might go to work for Disney or Pixar or something like that? Or is it more akin to you running your own business where you're going to travel and show your work at conventions or festivals or, be more of a freelancer? Or is it a hybrid where you're going to do a little bit of both? And the reality is most creative individuals do a little bit of both. They have a fairly traditional, stable, predictable job, especially for the first couple of years, not unlike being paid to go to grad school, so you can learn a lot of lessons in those early years. Mm-hmm. And then they often will also freelance on the side, and sometimes that grows into something bigger.
Okay. And the reason it's more for creative people is that you deal with some unorthodoxy, so to speak, with their careers. Is that
absolutely, yeah. Okay. There are very unique challenges that come with a creative career. In part is sort of defining what you do. I think sometimes, we hear creative or we hear artist and someone immediately thinks of painting on the wall or, web design, but the reality is much more nuanced and broad than that. So a lot of what we do is just figure out what you do as a creative and how do you explain that to someone outside of the world, because the world of creative individuals doing this in a professional capacity is pretty small. Right. So there are lots of different ways to monetize your creativity. So there's a lot of information about building a portfolio career and diversifying revenue strategies, and then a lot of nuances about managing cash flow, because it can be very predictable if you don't have a paycheck coming in every 2 weeks or so. And then, of course, there are tax nuances that I get excited about.
The big deal, that's right. So, and that goes for, being financial planners here. Everybody needs to work on budgeting. Some people are very good at it, they're naturally. So you need to figure out what is the best method for you. And if you are this type of person, as Elaine has described, please give that book a try. Do something, because most people, this is what the foundation for a good financial future is, budgeting, as we talked about, so focus on that. So, well, our time is, I want to go to your website now, because I want to show people some of the details of what you do and where they can find you. I mean, you really have a good website. So number one, MinervaFinancialArts.com is the name of this. So, and so that's where we're at, all right? You can see that, and I'm sure Eileen will post that as well. So let's start with this. I'm going to skip the I'm going to skip the part where it's about, because we've talked about you and all, but
Indeed.
as you scroll down a little bit, really you've got a couple areas where you can find the different areas of your website. So I'll scroll down a little bit. Really, this is a lot of what you do, right? I mean, creative coaching, the small group training, and then, of course, the events. So it's great because you can find how you can work with Elaine by clicking on these and taking a look at it, including coming over here to find out where she is speaking and working with people. So then you're pretty busy. Look at that, 7th, 8th, 13th. So
Indeed.
And you are around the country, so you're
Yeah.
flying periodically and such. So you're describing to me, how does your business, in thirds you said, right?
Yeah.
Describe that real quick.
Sure. So about a third of my time is spent working one-on-one with individuals or organizations. And this can be a one-time session when someone has a couple of questions about maybe they just received a large grant and they don't know what to do with it, or maybe they just feel really overwhelmed and they don't even know where to begin. Maybe then we have a 1-hour conversation and we just get through some basics, right? Sometimes it's a maybe 3 to 5 session package, if you will, that stretches over about a 2-month period. That's more of like a jump start to get a little bit more intention, a little bit more mindfulness around finance and cover some key issues. So that's how kind of the one-on-one consultation works. It's a flat fee basis. So we have a session, usually via Zoom, although I do see clients live in Franklinton as well for people who are local. And then you get a written recap of what we talked about afterwards and some next steps and an invoice for $110. So it's super easy, very straightforward, and very accessible, which is intentional. The second third of my
Let me, just for a second. So where are you in Franklinton?
In Franklinton?
Yeah.
You know the old porcelain factory that's now 400 Westridge,
Okay.
part of the 400 Square complex,
Right.
just a smidge south of Gravity?
Oh,
That's
okay.
where my office is.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Right.
It's also very close to Brewdog, so
Right. I was
that's a
going to
great
say
place for
land grant,
lunchtime meetings.
you know, that's how
Yep.
is it
That
land
is right
grant?
there.
Is it
Land grant
Franklinton?
is there, Strongwater, yeah.
Okay, all right. It's number 2.
Yes, number 2. So that's the first third of my time. And then the second third of my time is spent leading workshops. So oftentimes organizations that serve creative individuals will invite me to come in and talk about money or investing or taxes or budgeting or some combination of all of those things. So that's when I get to work with arts councils and groups all over the country. And oftentimes those programs are tied to individual support that the group will underwrite and or grant funding. There's a great program run by the Indiana Arts Commission that is a 3-day kind of financial entrepreneurship boot camp called On-Ramp. And at the end of that, participants are eligible for $2,000 in microfunding to kind of put what they learned into action. So that's a really nice way to kind of marry the education with an opportunity to use that education right away.
Cool. Okay.
And then the last third of my time is spent teaching and writing. So
Yeah.
it's pretty fantastic.
Yeah, and so you do spend a lot of time with them. Are you at the office every day here when you're in town? You try to go down there and do
I
your
try to be.
writing?
I don't always get there on Fridays, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
Fridays tend to be administrative days I take at home. But yeah, I typically see clients Monday, Wednesdays, and Thursdays, and then I teach on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Okay. And I know when we look at the website, they put their email in you know,
Sure.
to get.
There's a newsletter that goes out at the first of each month.
Is that a lot of the writing you're doing? I mean, is that?
That's a lot of the writing I'm doing. I'm writing a chapter now for a Business of Art book put out by the Center for Cultural Innovation in California. Their 3rd edition is coming out, so I'm updating a lot of the content on finding funding in the arts, which is pretty powerful. And then, as you mentioned, I'm working on the next book, the 5 questions you need to answer as a creative entrepreneur. So, so that'll be out at some point too.
Okay. And so what will, just so I know, what will that help people do? I mean, like you said, it's those 5 questions, but who specifically would that be good for?
Kind of the same target audience, going a little bit deeper into the strategy of running a creative business.
Yeah.
So let's say you're a chef or a web designer or a visual artist or a dancer or a musician, and you're kind of looking around and you say, I have all this talent, I have all these ideas, I want to change the world, but I don't really know how. And you can Google lots of entrepreneurial tools. There's some fantastic ones out there. This kind of distills all of that into 5 questions that a creative entrepreneur would need to answer.
Awesome. When's that coming out?
TBD. It depends on how many words I write today.
Okay.
I think probably late 2020 or maybe very early 2021.
I don't think people realize how much effort and time goes into doing these things, right? I mean,
but it's so much fun to do it.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's awesome. Well, listen, thank you. I know Eileen is going to post exactly where your website is, so that's a great place to start to meet you. You're on Twitter.
Yes.
Just go to your name, right? I mean,
Indeed.
Elaine, Grogan, Luttrull, Well, am I saying that correctly?
Yeah.
You'll find it good enough, and you'll find
For
it on the
sure.
website too. So, but anyway, thank you. It was
Totally,
great
it
meeting.
was such a pleasure.
Good
Yeah.
talking to you. So, well, thanks everybody. Have a great weekend, and we will see you next